Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Manfred Zimmel, editor of the Amanita Market Forecasting newsletter. Usually we talk to Manfred about economic matters, but today we're going to chat about what he calls electro smog and its long-term effects not just on humanity today, but into the future. Welcome to the show, Manfred.
Thanks, Tim, for inviting me again.
Manfred, can you tell us what electro smog is and what you fear it might be causing?
Yeah, electro smog is the word for the negative impact of EMF radiation. Actually, in my definition, electro smog is more than just the radiation itself. So I distinguish between three different levels of electro smog. And in the widest sense, it means how we are negatively affected as a society or as mankind by technology, especially high technology. And I've been working on this article for a long time. I've been studying all kinds of healing methods for over 20 years now, actually dozens of them. We have done research ourselves on this subject, and I've been writing now on electrosmog on this issue for 6 years, and actually my forecast is getting worse and worse each month because I've been able now to connect the dots, which I think nobody else has done this way. So connecting all kinds of studies, bringing the back together, analyzing like accident numbers, and what they are suggesting is just a nightmare scenario, which is very hard to avoid because we have like genetic damage or epigenetic damage that is not fully visible until like 30, 40, 50 years from now. But it's already caused, or it's, the damage is already done. And this forecast is going much deeper than everything else that is done. So politics, economics, this is just on the surface. Electrosmog is going to a much deeper level of physical and mental health of mankind, which has been crashing in the past years, at least the leading indicators. So there are many leading indicators for health, like in the financial markets, and they are all just crashing. And the effect will be so dramatic, it's even for me hard to figure out what the exact outcome will be, because it will make a society as we know it impossible, and not in 1,000 years, not in 100 years. It should be fully visible, or almost fully visible, in the 2020s or in the 2030s at the latest. And many of the effects are already in numbers of the past 3 or 4 years. So we have, especially since 2011 and 12, we have a lot of data series changing direction simultaneously, like for instance accident numbers. So the average brain is working less and less, which drives the number of accidents suddenly up just in the past few years. And this is just, of course, the tip of the iceberg. There are so many more effects that look maybe not so bad from an isolated perspective, but when you put everything together, it is just incredible. It is really hard to believe.
Now, what's causing this?
There are many reasons for the change in, let's call it, the parameters of physical and mental health. The most obvious one is, of course, lifestyle, which is changing, and it's starting with our children. So all studies are saying it's the children's brains that are most affected by the change in the lifestyle. And it's the way of learning that is much more superficial that causes tremendous problems when they are adults. For instance, Dr. Klinghardt, who is one of the best physicians in the world, he says that, I think he's referring to the US, the EQ of 17-year-old boys is already 15% lower than of 17-year-old girls. And the gap seems to widen each year. And this is the reason, for instance, why in almost all Western countries you have much more women enrolling at university than men. So it's like 40 or 50% higher rates of enrolling of females than of males. And this number, or this gap, is also widening each year. And this is, from one point of view, just the result of the huge crashing of the boys. So they are not available to intellectual performance that is required at university. Even though, of course, the average university level, at least in the Western world, is going down a lot year after year. There are a few exceptions, like mainly studies that are close to technological advancements, which are still kept on a high level, but the rest, it is not good in the eyes of the elites for people to be too clever. And so, for instance, to quote another study in China, there were just like 5% or so of a certain age group that had reading problems. And within just a couple of years, it exploded to 5 or 7 times this level. So that about a third, or probably already in 2015, half of the age group has reading problems. So this is a system, this is like 3,000 years old or so, and it gets ruined in just a couple of years by our technology because the system, the education system, got changed. So there is no longer handwriting involved, which creates much deeper learning in the brain. But instead, the Chinese language, which is different, of course, from Western language, is learned just on the computer. And this creates such a superficial and learning that, the children are less and less likely to be able to read. And there are really dozens of studies out there of the past few years who are suggesting this is a global deterioration that is visible on almost all levels, but there is a big difference, first the age and second the gender. So boys are reacting a lot more to this influence than girls, and old people are very little reacting. This is, of course, part of our biology because the brain of the young child is supposed to be very open to learning. It's just sucking up everything that it encounters. And then there is a second stage that is weaker but also quite strong in forming the brain, and this is the teenager years where you have a second imprinting of the brain. And then afterwards, after the age of 20 or so, the usual brain is just not moving too much in one way or another, and with each living year, the brain is less likely to change and to reflect back to the environment. And when there is a lot of negative influence, which we see now on all different levels, it's not just computers, it's media, it's also chemtrails and HARP and so much more. And these children, they are suffering so much more than we adults are. It's like Dr. Klingert quotes somebody saying, or is it just his own calculation, I'm not totally sure, but he says that the 12-year-old children in the U.S. are 90% of them are now chronically ill. This is a number that you used to see at the age of 70 or 80. And so when you try to figure out how the trend will go, when 12-year-old children are already so sick, I mean, it's just hard to believe, especially when you take into consideration that the amount of negativity or of electro smog or of chemtrails or of GMOs or of negative frequencies is just growing year after year a lot. I mean, you have like electro smog is about 20 years or so per year growing, which is of course huge. So it's doubling then every couple of years. And our children, they are less and less able to cope with that. And the younger children, they already get a lot from the parents because the parents have already some damage created to the systems on all levels. You can, for instance, see it on the brain level and the enzymes on the level of meridians and whatever. Wherever you look, you have the same very negative effect. And this is passed on to the children. So they already have, especially the children born in the past few years, since 2012, they have a very big burden. And yeah, it's from a personal point, it's of course I'm very sorry about all that. And this is my contribution to change that, because this is much more important for the life of everybody here than just the next big buck to make. It's about our health, our well-being, our joy of life, our future, of course. Our children are our future, and we see that our future is now totally destroyed, which is reflected by the health of our children or the general condition of our children, which is just getting worse and worse each year.
Is this reflected in fact that when I watch the news at night now, trivial things like playing kittens or video of a whale surfacing, that gets much more attention than very serious issues? Is a sign of this that superficial things now, the shiny thing, the shiny object becomes more engaging than serious things?
You can bet, because we live mostly in a quite hostile environment. The news, watch the news, it's just very negative, and about 80% of the brains, they are not able to cope with very negative news. You can measure it. The frontal lobes are just shut down. So this is a refusal to deal with the negative news that is coming, or with the negative information. And so it's a kind of a hypnosis that is actually created. It's a survival mechanism that helps in the short run for people to survive when they turn to something nice. But of course, it's also a refusal to acknowledge reality, to deal with the world how it is. And eventually, it's very negative then, because it means to avoid the real problems we have, to face the personal and global problems, to deal with them. People, escape into virtual realities, out of the bodies, out of the feelings, out of their thoughts even to some degree. So this makes them much more easily controllable when they are not really fully in charge of their personality now. And in turn, what's a short-term solution then becomes, over the long haul, a very big problem, adds to the problem itself. So this is certainly a very negative trend by itself, the denial, the addiction, the being scared of reality, having the fear of the future, things like that.
We'll have more with Manfred Zimmel next on The Goddard Report.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on The Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back to the Goddard Report. We're speaking to Manfred Zimmel, editor of the Amanita Market Forecasting newsletter. He's done some research into what he calls electro smog and the possible effects it might be having on all of humanity. Is this being deliberately done, or is this just one huge accident caused by the fact that humans like new technology and they like new things?
Yeah, I think it's both, yeah. On a personal level, I mean, you can distinguish between different motivations. It's our limbic system that's defining our motivation. And the strongest motivations we have as humans is first safety. And this is especially true of women. And then the second big motivation is power. Power is a much stronger motivation for men than for women. And then the third one is learning, or new things, or distraction, or having fun. This is the weakest motivation. And it's a little bit different also here for men and women. Like, men are more technologically open, while women are more socially open. And one could say that people now are totally focused on the weakest motivation, on this learning aspect, because the other two are simply not fulfilled in their daily lives. So what we see is that actually in almost all countries, I think, around the globe, the safety or the feeling of safety is just crashing. And it's similar with power. People feel more and more powerless, which is true on most levels. Like, the institutions are getting bigger. Like, you had like states, and then you have bigger institutions like the EU, or even you have United Nations. And the same is true of many companies. So mergers. The goal of the elites is to bring as much power to the top as possible, concentrate the power in as few hands as possible, to have full control of it. And this is what we experience now in our daily lives. It's the loss of power. And so I think people are also, right now in the end times, they're very focused on this learning aspect, because this is the only area where the motivation is still fulfilled.
And it's the one area where perhaps you have control over.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where you can do a lot for your personal life, where it can change your life, where it can enhance the quality of your life. While safety is something that is to a large degree coming from the political and economic system, also from the from other systems, but a lot of safety is coming from the outside, and the same is true to a large degree with power.
Is that why governments are trying to convince us that we should be giving up personal freedoms to increase our security measures?
Yes, this is the deal we're offered in a way, and I think it won't work. And of course, it's not an honest deal. It's they're creating a problem to solve another problem. So the goal is to create so much unsafety, so much powerlessness, that people are willing to give up even the last piece of freedom, to save their lives in a way, or at least not to lose everything.
Manfred, what kind of research have you been doing to come up with some of these ideas and concepts? Yeah,
there is so much research I've been doing. It's very, very hard for me to give now just one quick hint. I mean, in the newsletter then that is sent out, there are many links to studies or many suggestions. I think the key is really to have a very good, to connect the dots, to have a holistic view of what is going on, because this is what today probably 99% are missing. So people maybe see one aspect is deteriorating in their life or in the economy or whatever, and they focus on that, but very few of them see the whole picture. And I really suggest also to train the brain, because with the brain it's always the same, use it or lose it. So like one brain researcher here in Germany, he said, if you want to have children that are smart and who are doing good at math, you should allow them to play with their fingers, because it's the body that's the foundation for their learning. And actually, probably this is what is most important, the training of the other forms of intelligence, like not just the mental intelligence. In my experience, this is really true. It's like there is so much learning, like for instance, over the body. And the body is so intelligent, and when you use the mind, the body mind, as we call it in vortex healing, many things, they just jump at you. You also train your intuition. They become obvious when you have a look at them. There's not really, it's much more than just a mental process or research. There is a lot also of the direct perception of how things are. So, for instance, when you are at an airport, you see that very few people are looking around. Everybody's just looking at the mobile phone, and they seem to be almost blind, what is going on in their life. And this is what makes their fields, also the energetic field, so tight and so narrow, and also destroys actually the base of the learning, because it takes them literally out of the body.
Is there too much structured learning? My mother used to say at Christmas time, you kids play more with the boxes the toys came in than the toys themselves. Should we be giving our children more boxes to play with instead of toys?
Yeah, you can bet. This is good advice. Yeah. Of course, we need space. We need freedom for creativity to unfold. And what you see now is that children are just, put into a very structured environment all of the time. There is nothing or very little that is coming from within them that has the space just to emerge. It's excellent when children feel bored, even though most of them probably can't stand it any longer. They need something to do. But there was research by one Harvard psychologist, and he did research. It was already, I think, many years ago. I learned about it in one class I did in the U.S. It was in 1997. It was called Creativity in Business, which was part of the MBA program at this time, and it was by far the best class I've ever taken. It was just so mind-opening. Like, for instance, there was one professor who didn't say a word, I think for 2 or 4 years, I'm not sure for how long exactly. For years he didn't say a word in the monastery. And this was, also one part to access the inner resources when you are not able to access in the outer resources. And so in this class we learned, this creativity class, about a researcher who in the US studied children. He found that 1 out of 30 children was brilliant. It was staring into the sky, literally. It wasn't doing anything. It was just open in this very meditative space. And this is the place where happiness emerges, where creativity emerges. It creates mostly alpha brain waves, which are lost in most adults who are in a better state, in this excited state. It's just a relaxed state, a very creative state where you can restructure yourself without the structure from outside being pulled over you.
Teachers used to slap you on the knuckles and say, stop your daydreaming and get back to work.
Yeah.
The worst thing they could have done.
Well, it's hard to say if all of them were in the good state or in the creative state. I mean, many of them could have also just been beamed away. It's not too easy to tell from the outside what's really going on. But in general, it's true that being just calm is, a much better attitude for learning than the other approaches.
Well, it also seems to me that they like to stifle creativity. If you're doing something different outside what would be considered normal, well, what are you doing that for? That's a waste of your effort and time. Do what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, exactly. This is also where technology plays a key role, because this is the instrument how we are all made equal in a way, or synchronized. It's getting harder and harder really to get this space and freedom in one's life, and it has to be really a decision you make or you don't make, because otherwise when you just live, you are pulled in by the crowd sentiment, which is always negative, and you will start slowly in all the things that the crowd is doing, and finally you're arriving at the same state of mind when you are not really making the decision to go your own way, to follow your own path, to be creative. This is of course also very good for financial decisions, because when you make decisions following the crowd sentiment, you're almost always wrong. But this is also the place where you have to look for to be totally clear, to be aligned with truth. And then you can go on, and then you make a step and you start a journey, and eventually this journey will lead somewhere. You don't know the precise outcome, because when you really in your freedom, you will always create a new path. And this is the wonderful journey you're making then, or you're following just the crowd, which is, of course, the safer path. This is how we are wired in our brains. We are crowd humans. Almost all of the time it has been better to be with the crowd, but wrong, than to be right and away from the crowd. So this is just a survival mechanism.
Manfred, how can people subscribe to your newsletter to find out more about your financial theories, financial predictions, and also more about this electro smog thing that is more than just the electronic fields thrown off by all of our high-tech gadgets?
Yeah, the website is www.amanita.at. That's AMANITA, amanita.at, so it's not .com. And there you will find a lot in the free area, also the newsletter discussing that, and articles, and you can subscribe to the market letter, which is admittedly quite expensive, and I don't really want to attract very engaged subscribers. I mean, my approach, it's certainly in the first month not easy to understand. It's much more than just a market letter. I also want to teach something. I want to provide explanations why I'm making calls like that. So it's also a creative adventure, I think, being part of my newsletter, either the free newsletter or the premium market letter. And the difference is, of course, that the market letter is focusing on financial market forecasts with a portfolio, and the free newsletter includes a little bit of the market letter, but focuses more on the broad topics like electro smog and things like that.
Manfred, thank you very much for taking time out of your vacation to speak to us from Vienna.
Thank you, Jim.
You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Check out our popular YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. Comments or questions about our show can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.